Many believers think the biggest obstacle in their life is weakness, but often it is not weakness, it is hesitation. It is fear of taking one step forward when God is already opening the door. The Bible describes a moment like this with extraordinary clarity. Israel stood at the entrance to the Promised Land. The promise was real. The calling was real. God's presence was real. But they still did not enter. Why? Because they listened to the wrong voices. When the scouts returned from the Promised Land, they brought evidence. They showed fruit. They showed abundance. They confirmed everything God had promised. But then they said something else. Yes, the land is good, but the enemies are too strong. Only one voice spoke differently. Caleb said, "We can do this. God will fight for us." Two perspectives, same reality, different conclusions, and the future of an entire nation depended on which voice they believed. This story is not only about Israel, it is about every believer. Because at some point in your life, God brings you to a boundary, a decision, a confrontation, a truth you cannot avoid anymore, and suddenly voices appear. One voice says, "You cannot do this. You will fail. It is too late. It is too difficult. Nobody succeeds at this." Another voice says, "Trust God. Take the step. Move forward. He will fight with you." The tragedy is this: most people listen to the first voice. And that is why Israel walked 40 years in the desert. Not because God changed his plan, but because they refused to move. Sometimes people ask, why am I stuck in the same place spiritually? Why do the same problems return? Why do I repeat the same patterns? Why does nothing change? And the answer is often hidden in this story. Because somewhere there was a moment when a battle should have been accepted but was avoided. Some battles are uncomfortable conversations. Some battles are decisions about truth. Some battles are about leaving something behind. Some battles are about beginning something new. Avoiding the battle does not remove the problem. It only postpones freedom. Jesus once said something mysterious. Before a strong man's house can be robbed, the strong man must first be tied up. Think about that image. No one defeats a strong man directly. First, he is restrained, limited, immobilized. Only then can his house be taken. The same strategy exists in spiritual life. The enemy rarely attacks your life directly. First, he attacks your thinking. He ties your imagination. He ties your attention. He ties your desires. He ties your courage. And when your interior freedom disappears, your exterior life slowly follows. Look honestly at modern life. How many families are tied without realizing it? A father tied to endless distraction. A mother tied to exhaustion and anxiety. A child tied to a screen. A home tied to silence instead of conversation. And slowly, something disappears from that house. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Hope disappears. Connection disappears. Prayer disappears. Joy disappears. And nobody notices when it begins. Sometimes the enemy does not need to destroy your life. He only needs to distract it, because distraction delays decisions, and delayed decisions delay transformation. This is why Scripture speaks so often about courage. Not because courage removes fear, but because courage allows movement even when fear exists. There is another misunderstanding many believers carry. They think spiritual maturity means avoiding conflict. But Scripture never teaches this. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, he moved forward. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, he moved forward. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon David, he moved forward. God's Spirit does not produce passivity. It produces direction, movement, clarity, action. Many people imagine faith as something quiet and private, something that should not disturb anyone, something that should not change relationships, something that should not challenge habits. But biblical faith always changes something. It changes priorities. It changes courage. It changes identity. It changes decisions. Because faith is not information. Faith is participation in God's movement. Sometimes people say, I am waiting for God to change my situation. But sometimes God is waiting for you to step forward, not because He abandoned you, but because He already gave you the strength needed for the next step. Remember Caleb, he did not deny the difficulty. He did not deny the danger. He simply trusted that God's presence was stronger than the obstacle. That trust changed history. There is a story about a boxer who returned to the ring after losing his strength. People asked him, "Why are you fighting again at your age? Why risk injury? Why risk failure?" And he answered, "For milk for my children." Suddenly the fight had meaning. Suddenly fear became smaller. Suddenly exhaustion became acceptable, because love creates courage. The same thing happens in faith. When you know what you are fighting for, you discover strength you did not know you had. Sometimes believers think courage is personality, but courage is relationship. It grows when someone knows he is not alone. That is why Scripture repeats again and again, "The Lord is with you," not only watching you, with you, not only supporting you, with you, not only judging you, with you. And when someone truly believes this, movement becomes possible again. The promised land was never meant to be reached by comfort. It was meant to be entered by trust, and trust always requires one step forward before certainty appears. So if today your life feels like a desert, do not assume God abandoned you. Ask instead, is there a step I am avoiding? Because sometimes the distance between the desert and the promise is only one decision long. And that decision begins with trust.